All right, we're live.
Hey, how's
Yo,
it going?
comic book worms. This is not man. Welcome to my channel. I have a special guest today, Pat Bollin. Is that right? Pat Bollin?
Very close, Pat Bollin.
Yeah,
Yep.
he's
A lot of people butcher my name, so thank you very much.
Pat Bollin. He's the artist, art teacher, graphic designer. He's a YouTuber, podcaster. He wears many hats. I'm just going to let him introduce himself. Pat, would you introduce yourself to my community here, please?
Hi, Naman. Thanks for having me on the show. I think we met because you and I both actually interviewed a couple of the same people for your show and my show, the Creator Forge podcast. And then I was very honored that you asked me to come on the show after, I guess, looking at all my various stuff on the internet, which is various and all over the place. But anyway, I'm Pat Bollin. I work for a company called Bash Games, or a studio called Bash Games Studio, which is one of many studios within Aristocrat Technologies, and they create casino games. And so what I do is concept art, illustration, graphic design, and final illustration. I might have said that already. Sorry. I wear a lot of hats at that studio. I do a lot of pipeline work. I work very closely with the tech team to help implement our art into the game. So basically, casino games are they're video games. That's essentially what they are. It's just, you've got some money on the line, right?
Especially nowadays. The used to be when it was all mechanical, but
yep, the one-armed bandit is what they called those. Yeah.
nowadays
Yeah.
you just go like this.
There's still, if you walk into a casino, there's still a few one-armed bandits in there that actually have the arm that you can pull, but very few of them still do anymore because they're all video based. They're not like mechanical games anymore. And so what I'd like to tell people who are maybe more familiar with online or mobile gaming is that casino games are more like a mobile game. And I have never actually worked in mobile games myself, except for the fact that a lot of my games go to mobile casinos. So a lot of my art does end up on somebody's iPhone or other smartphone. But I know that there's a lot of similarities because I have a lot of friends who work in mobile games. And when we kind of compare notes, there's an enormous amount of similarity in the level of detail and the level of complexity to the game. Very different math models, very different game mechanics. But there's a lot of similarity in terms of the way the design is done, and you have a very specific screen size and format that you have to stick with, and so on and so forth. So if you're not somebody who's done online casino games or been into a casino lately, what I do might be more akin to, like I said, like casual mobile gaming,
mobile apps,
like mobile apps. So as you said, I also am one of the founders of the Creator Forge podcast, along with my buddy Jeremiah.
Yeah.
What's that?
That's where at first when you came over to I think we interviewed John Boy Myers.
Yes.
Right? And then you came over, and I realized you had same people that, and I said, hey, I don't think I'll be able to interview some of those people, and so I contact you, and so,
right.
Yeah, you got me. What's his name? What's that?
Ernest.
Ernest, yes.
Yes,
Ernest.
you had Ernest on the show.
Yeah.
Ernest Chan. He was a fantastic guest for, I think, both of us. He's and if you don't mind, it's kind of a plug of the show. I know that's supposed to be at the end, but this is how we met. So the Creator Forge podcast, what we do is we interview people, whether it be in the animation fields, comic books, game art, and even like film and television. We've interviewed people who are producers, artists, sound engineers, like you name it. Oh, thank you. Yeah. And that's creatorforge.com, not creatorforge.com. That's a common misconception. Creative Forge will actually take you to the website of a real forge. And but anyway, so we have done almost 50 interviews over the course of 4 or 5 years. We've tried to get 1 or 2 out per month since we started, but then COVID really slowed us down, because we used to do all of these in person, and unfortunately we had to kind of recalibrate and figure out what we wanted to do afresh once COVID started. I think a lot of people suffer the same type of a thing. But what we try and do, we are not what I think of as journalism. We are an educational organization, and what we try and do with the podcast is, aside from getting just a phenomenal amount of enjoyment out of interfacing with fellow artists in so many different careers, we try to bring their knowledge to you, the viewer, so to speak, who might be trying to get into creative careers as well. And hey, we've got somebody from, various types of careers who might be able to give you advice on, how to go about searching for your own career in creative fields. Everything from how you got your start, what kind of education you might need, whether or not you need a degree, whether or not, you get the idea, how
Right.
the hiring process goes, everything. And then once you're in the door, how do you conduct yourself in a studio if you indeed are working in some form of studio, like an animation studio? And so Ernest Chen, as an example, really fantastic resource, great guy. He's been an animator for, 22 years, I think he said. And he is the animation supervisor for DreamWorks Animation Television. And man, that guy was just such a great wealth of information. And like I say, I personally get so much out of it, and I hope that our listeners are too. Again, thanks for having me on the show. I'm flattered. I'm usually the one doing the interviewing, so
Well, you're gonna have to help me because you're the experienced one.
Yeah.
The otaku was the guy who's supposed to interview you, and so I'm you're gonna have to just carry me along there.
No worries. I'm a talkative guy, so I'm pretty sure I can I can keep going.
My audience is comic book collectors,
Right.
and I think there might be crossover because a lot of comic book collector has that little, that daydreaming thing where they want to be the artist. They want to be. So I think there might be crossover. For instance, I always fantasize about being an artist, and so I like to draw and stuff and sketch. And
Awesome.
stuff for hobby and stuff. But
right.
What made you start the art? I mean, what
comics? Right.
Yeah, what's your origin story?
So there's my passion right there on my chest.
What is
so
that?
Marvel Comics.
Let me take this off. Show me.
Yep.
Oh, okay. Marvel
yeah,
Comics.
and you can see lots of stuff here, and you can't see it, but behind the camera, I've got an incredible Hulk statue and all of that. I'm a nerd, man. Like all of your viewers, I'm a big comic book fan, and love all the MCU stuff that's coming out as well. But yeah, comic books. My brother was an avid collector of comics. Oh God, I didn't know you were going to be showing this stuff. I really need I haven't updated that thing in probably 8 years, or sorry, 4 years, other than the last 2 that you see there that I'm very proud of. That's from some of my current work.
No,
well, that's very, very old, but I still love that. That's
I love that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, the horses are about 2 years old at this point, and that's from a game, casino game that's in the casinos now that's doing very well. And then the other one is a concept for a game that didn't quite get through the pipeline, but I was really proud of the design for the character, so I popped that up there. And
this is digital art?
Yeah, this is all done in Photoshop. Okay. Yeah, I also work in various other software as well, but Photoshop is something that every aspect of our pipeline can pull from or is affected by something in Photoshop. So like all the 3D artists, if you need to hand off something to them to work from, to make, to model from, they usually want it in 3D, in vector layers in Photoshop. And then same with this. This was not made into 3D after all, but it was originally going to go to the 3D artist, and that's how come the arm is disconnected and all of that stuff, so that they can see every aspect of the character to model it. So
this won't be their skins, right?
yeah. They model it and make it move. And another character that I can't talk about actually is the one that made it through the pipeline. That'll be coming out probably this coming year. And it was the same kind of process from, concept that I did in Photoshop, hand it off to the 3D artist, and then they take it from there and bring it to life in 3D. And then, yeah. So, I also work in Affinity. I work in Clip Studio Paint. I am
I'm trying to learn Clip Studio myself.
Oh, Clip Studio is great. I actually was. Now, if you know anything about Clip Studio Paint, we're kind of jumping back and forth here. I'm going to come back to what you asked me earlier, like how I got started in art, and finish that off. But if you know anything about Clip Studio Paint, it started out in the U.S. as Manga Studio, which which I don't think that's even sold in the U.S. anymore. It was the exact same thing as Clip Studio Paint. It's just they were marketing it to more like comic book artists and manga artists. And I became somewhat of an aficionado, I guess. I wouldn't say necessarily an expert, but I actually did some like workshops and stuff at comic book conventions for people who wanted to know how to do that. And I was doing that under the auspices of the Savannah College of Art and Design when I was both a student there and then also when I was a professor there for a little while. But anyway, we'll come back to that. Getting back to your question earlier, how did I get my start in art? It was comic books. My brother was a big fan. He got me started at age like 6 or 7 drawing. I was probably drawing before then, but I think I got serious about it at like 6 or 7. I remember, we literally had this like Foot Locker that was supposed to be for toys, and we cleared them all out at a certain age and got rid of a bunch of it and started filling it with comic books instead. And I remember Thor was a big one. Lots of Marvel stuff, although there was a fair amount of DC comics as well. We were definitely into, Batman.
When was that?
Oh God, you want me to age myself?
Yeah.
1976, 77. I don't mind.
I started collecting 74, so.
Yeah. Wow, yeah. I would say I started collecting seriously later, and then I sold most of my first collection to get my first car, which I regret. Oh my God, I regret. Some of the stuff that I had back then that I was taking good care of, like.
Here's another artist, by the way.
Hi, how's it going? Like I had like a first printing of X-Men number 12, like the first run of X-Men number 12, which I think that's in mint condition is, I don't know, last time I looked, it was in the 30,000s or something like that, and I had it, and I bought a $1,700 car by selling it and like half my collection. And that was in 1980 something. So
did you ever the X-Men Giant one? What is that? X-Men? Is that an X-Men?
This is actually something I bought from Hobby Lobby, and it's just a metal, like it's a metal print, But yes, that right there, the reason I love that so much, and I was shocked that I found that in Hobby Lobby, because that cover, I wouldn't say it changed my life, so to speak, but that was, of course, my first introduction to the X-Men, the uncanny X-Men. And it blew my mind and all my friends' minds. And I remember sitting in my buddy's, bedroom. We were like 8, 9 years old or something like that, going through this giant size X-Men that we all had our own copies of. And it was just amazing. And I never looked back. That was just like what I wanted to do. And of course, I did do comics briefly, but very, very briefly. And we'll get into that later if you want.
This kind of stuff is like to me, this kind of stuff is like a comic book. I mean,
yeah, if you go to patbollin.com, PATBOLLIN.com, and go to gallery or sequential, I don't even remember that. I'm terrible about keeping my online presence current.
Is it an IG? Maybe you got some on IG. Oh, there it is. Let me see if I.
Yeah, there's some sequential art there. I think it's sequential art, and there's a little project I did with a buddy of mine on the left there, and so I actually have 2 degrees in sequential art, and in the 90s I got a degree from the Savannah College of Art Design in sequential art, and then I actually went back to SCAD Atlanta
Man,
in
you were living my
2000.
dream, bud.
What's
Wow,
that?
you're living my dream.
uh, I didn't continue with comics, and I don't want to get into that too deep, other than to say that I wanted a better financial life for myself faster, and I miss comics, and I really do want to return to it eventually.
Uh-huh.
But when I first started out trying to do comics for the industry, so to speak, they don't pay incoming talent that great. Let's put it that way.
Right.
And my wife and I, fiance at the time, wanted to buy a house, and we wanted to live a better life. And I was working 16 hours a day to get pencils, inks, and tones done on comic book pages that I was getting paid very, very little for. And I absolutely loved what I was doing, but I had to pay the bills.
Right.
So ultimately I had to make a choice between that and what was paying the bills, which at the time was teaching, and I was doing an awful lot of illustration for corporations, marketing materials and things like that. And then I really got into digital painting, and which kind of got me into the work that I'm doing now. Once I started digital painting, it opened up some different doors for me. And so that's kind of, I've been doing what I'm doing now for about 10 years. And I would say that I've been a professional artist for 20 to 22 years, where I was making my full-time living off of my art. And then, anyway, do you have any questions at this point, or?
Yeah, I mean, I really like the way you teach. I saw. Let me see if I can figure this one out.
Or are you talking about my sketch videos that are terribly outdated on my?
Yeah, it's outdated, I guess.
That's so sweet of you to say, and I've had some. That's not me.
Yeah,
I've had some really great feedback, both on YouTube and off of YouTube, about those videos. And all I did was just kind of talk through what I was thinking. I wasn't even, it wasn't like those were courses or anything. I just talked about what I was thinking and what my process was at the time. And these were just very loose and fast. And a lot of people said, I learned so much watching those. And I really, really appreciate those comments, because that wasn't so much my goal with these pieces, but it really does kind of inspire me to want to go back to teaching on some level, and doing these videos. I had a good time doing them. It's just, time gets away from you, and it's kind of tough to find the time to sit down and dedicate to it.
The main thing I learned on this one was that you are saying that, hey, use a bigger brush first.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people have commented on that. And I guess to me at the time, that wasn't a revolutionary thought. I'd only been doing that for a couple of years, though. I was somebody, and that, I think that's why I even mentioned it, because aside from the fact that I clearly started with a thicker brush, I was always the person who jumped into the details too fast prior to that. Yeah. And when I discovered, this ability to jump in with the larger strokes first, it made it more enjoyable. It made it faster. It made it flow better.
It's really scary to use a bigger brush for a person like me. Think, I don't want to make a mistake, and so I start with the little one, lighter, and then once you develop a little confidence in your drawing, I guess you put a bigger one. Never thought of putting bigger brush first, but it would have saved me so much time if we did the bigger brush first.
Try it. I'm on the computer all the time now, and it's so funny because I really, really miss using traditional media, clay, paint, ink with a brush on paper. The physical connection you get And the funny thing is the smell.
Another artist here.
Hey, well, artist, do you enjoy the smell of your art supplies? I have, if you see this thing right here, this is like an IKEA drawer set that's actually made for kitchens. I've got 3 of them full of art supplies and also camera gear and stuff like that. But every time I open the drawers on one of these with my old art supplies in them that I refuse to get rid of because I keep telling myself I'm going to go back to traditional media, I smell it and I'm like, and it just memories flood back,
Right.
and I miss it and I need to make some time for it. But all of the work that I do, of course, goes into video content. So it's all in the computer. It's very rare that I do anything traditional for my current career. So.
Wow, we got all kind of artists jumping into the Comic Jen is another wannabe artist, right?
The smell is part of the inspiration. Yeah. I really enjoy. I don't know if we had anybody here when we were making introductions, so I'll just jump back in with that real quick. And so what I do is casino games. I do the graphic art and illustration, graphic design that goes into video games, basically, which are strikingly similar to mobile games, casual mobile games. And I don't, unfortunately, have a whole lot. I keep telling myself I'm going to put more of my more recent work up. This was actually done late last year, I want to say, mid to late last year. So it's fairly recent. And then the next one, the horses, was done about 2 years ago, and really proud of those. It was also a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. And horses are really, really hard to draw and paint. And one of the things that's key about what I do is everything that we paint gets animated for the most part. So you have to, like, everything that you see there, each ear is an individual layer. Each eye has the ability to blink, which I'm not an animator, so I didn't animate it up and put it on my art station, but it got animated by one of the animators in our studio. So everything I do gets kind of handed off to somebody for what's called limited animation. It's like puppet animation, or like a paper puppet almost. So all the joints are disconnected from, like if you look at the hoof can move independently of the I guess wrist area, and that can move independently from the upper arm, for example, and so on and so forth. So that way the animator was able to kind of make the horse do a little rear up, and he made the nostrils flare, and the head kind of bob up and down, and moved the mane. Each mane is in probably 20 different parts so that they can flow independently of each other. And each, like all the clouds, they're independently painted as well.
Here to confirm all that.
It's complex. I really enjoy the kind of puzzle of it, if you will, because you have to learn how to, how to think in a kind of a right brain and a left brain way at the same time, because there's a real logic to putting all of this stuff together so that it can be animated effectively. So
have you done some animation?
I have not, other than if you look on my Instagram, there's a couple of old paintings where I had some old, I think, tigers that I animated in Photoshop. Hold on. It's like the one that's not finished there. If you click on that one.
This one?
No, the cat, like the gray cat that's not finished. No, the one that's not finished. Below. Yeah.
Oh, it's an animation there.
Yeah. If you not working. No. Well, anyway. So I sort of animated that, and then so if you go to my Instagram, you can peruse that. There's a whole lot of just sketches and stuff in here. There's a tiger that I did in there, lower, I think. If you go much lower, there's another tiger that I did, and I animated that. But I'm not an animator. I understand the basics. I've actually taught in the animation department at SCAD and the Art Institute, but I was teaching previs. So your concept art, your figure drawing, character design, that sort of thing. So environment design, and just the basics.
We have a question here. Do you draw first and then transfer parts to different layers?
Yes, sometimes. And then sometimes I know exactly what I'm going to do, and I just kind of jump right in, and I'll draw or paint the head, and sometimes I sketch first, and sometimes I jump right in with like what I call color shapes. It just depends on how I feel that day. Honestly, I've tried so many different ways out, and I've never gotten one methodology that's exactly what I want. But if I had to nail down my favorite, it is more of a line art and color fill type of a methodology, where I kind of sketch it first, and then I'll come back and tighten up the lines, but I'll do it in layers. So the head, then the body, if we're doing a figure like a human, say the head, then the body, if there's hands and arms in there, I do those all on their own layers. And then what I'll do is I'll do color fills behind the line art, and then I'll paint that. And then what I'll do is I'll come back and do what in the comic book world they call color holds. I have done actually some comic book coloring. So, and I took classes from some amazing professional comic book color artists, including Nolan Woodard, and we had some people come to SCAD and speak, including Laura Martin, who is one of the most prolific, well-known color artists in comics. She was actually on the Creative Forge podcast. But anyway, so that kind of color hold style. So if you go down a little bit, if you don't mind, and click on, the scarab. That's a really fun, the scarab.
This one? This one?
Go up.
Oh, no, this one.
Yeah. Oh, nothing's working here.
Well, I don't know why it's not working.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe ArtStation will work. Try going back to ArtStation.
ArtStation. This one.
Comic Journey. I'm gonna answer that question in a minute. If you go down to the like the female character, she's a pretty good example of this. It's an old example, but it's a good example.
Yeah.
So I drew that first, again in layers. I tightened up the line art. Then I came back and I put color shapes behind everything, and then painted in the color shapes. And then, even though this doesn't look necessarily like line art and color fill, ultimately it is at its core. And I think I was still really kind of getting a handle on that style of working, to where eventually the lines got eliminated and became part of the painting. And to finish off that question, ultimately, I often just flatten the lines into the color shapes behind it after I get it to a certain point, and then I just finish off the painting that way. But again, keeping everything separate. Everything that you see here, the hair could flow. I think the hair was in like 15 different parts, right? So it could be animated. Her eyes could blink, so on and so forth. So, Comic Journey, find yourself only making art for work.
I'm going to guess what that answer might be. I think you might enjoy it. So here.
Yeah, I enjoy what I do very much, but the answer to that is sort of yes. So, I really do want to get back to making sketch videos and so forth for my YouTube channel and just for myself. I really haven't done a lot of sketching for myself over the years, for the last several years. And then part of that, though, is that I got interested in doing the podcast and some video content that I'm working on. And I find that the enjoyment that I used to get out of sketching in my sketchbook all the time ended up transferring over to learning how to edit video and EQ and do compression for vocals and things like that. So, like, I think art is it's not just one thing. Art is creativity is just a lot of different things to me. When I was younger, it was all sketching on paper, and it was comic book characters a lot. And then I got into landscape painting for a while and things like that. I get a little bit of enjoyment out of every creative task that I do. I do miss drawing more often. I do want to get back into that. But I think comic journey, your question probably surrounds something that an awful lot of artists go through. When you get to a certain point in your career, it especially like for me, got a family, I've got a 4-year-old at home. My time is hard. It's hard to come by sometimes. And so finding the time to sit down and focus and enjoy sketching like I did when I was younger, it's a little more difficult. That's why I always recommend, bust your butt when you're younger and you have all the time in the world. Put down the video game controller and draw if that's what you want to do for a living. But don't fall into the hustle culture either. I've been a victim of that, where I've worked 16 to 20 hours a day sometimes and gotten 3 or 4 hours of sleep if I was lucky. And I don't ever want to live that way again. So that's one of the reasons my time is short, because I value my sleep. But I all the work that I did definitely added up to what has become a pretty great career, doing what I want. And like I said, I do want to return to doing some sketch work again. And I've got some comic book stories in me still that I eventually want to create. I'm not sure when that's going to happen, to be perfectly honest, but I think it'll happen eventually. It's too kind of, it's in my soul. Comics is how I got passionate about drawing and painting in the first place. And I just don't think that your first love ever leaves you completely, so I definitely miss telling stories in the way that you do for comics or maybe animation or something like that. And one of the things that I love about comics is that there is the possibility of being the auteur, right? You can work in a collaborative environment with comics, but you have the possibility of being the writer, the artist, the distributor, so on and so forth, especially nowadays. So that's one of the things that I love about comics is that you can put your own fingerprints on it, your own stamp. With animation, as much as I absolutely love animation, and again on the Creative Forge podcast, we've interviewed quite a few animators, and I absolutely love the animation industry and all the different aspects that go into animation. But it's not something where, on average, like you being an independent animator is a lot harder, especially if you're going to try and make something big that's really going to make its mark on society, right? As where comics, I think it's more possible to be a one man band and really kind of put your voice into it. So anyway,
I mean, you seem to keep in touch with a lot of creators out there. Is that for your self? What do you call it? Motivation or?
partly, I don't know. The Creative Forge podcast came out of myself and my buddy Jeremiah and a few other artists would get together for lunch every day at work, and we'd have these just great conversations about art process, about pipeline, about how studios should be effectively ran, any number of topics. And we kept saying, man, I wish I had a microphone on. This was a great conversation, and so we decided to give it a try. And that's kind of where the Creative Forge podcast came from. So again, it has been difficult to find time on a very regular basis to get the Creative Forge podcast out. But we've had a number of people contact us, not on YouTube, funny enough. It's like I'll have people reach out to me on LinkedIn more than anything and tell me how much they love the show and how much they got out of X, Y, or Z conversation with, various guests. And so I get motivation from that to keep going with it. We ask ourselves the question all the time. And Naman, I'm sure you and your partner on this show must ask yourself this question all the time too. It's like, do I have enough time in my life, and do I have enough motivation to keep this show going? Because it's time consuming, but I really love doing it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, I have some selfish reason why I'm doing it. I mean, I want to stay close to the art world industry, and I have a boy. He went to art class and everything.
Right.
He wants to get into it, but he's not able to break into it. So I'm going, hey, I mean, but he's not very what do you call it, dyslexic.
Outgoing.
Yeah, he's not like me.
Mhm. He's got more social anxiety.
Yeah, he got a lot of social anxiety, and
Let's
he don't want to show
let's talk about that for just a second. I would say even now, and I don't seem like it right now on the show. I've become very comfortable on mic and in front of a camera because I force myself to. But I've got a lot of social anxiety, and when I was younger, it was crippling. I even now, if I'm in a social situation, I really have to force myself to get out there and be social and meet people and things like that. And it can be very difficult. And a lot of artists I found have that.
Yeah.
And I think that, interestingly enough, I think that there is a certain amount of that personality trait kind of feeds into like being alone and working on your creative side a lot, right? Because if you're not somebody who's as good at getting out there and being social, it might tend to lead to you wanting to spend more time on your personal hobbies. And if that happens to be drawing or painting or something, it can lead or it can lead you to focus more and more on that part of your personality, that part of your life, right? That was true for me very much. I drew a lot, partly because it kept me, by myself in a room sometimes when I was younger. And it wasn't until, a little later, fifth or sixth grade or something like that, when people started wanting to be more social with me because of art. And that came and went throughout school. Once you get into high school, it's a different animal. But
It just kicked in my memory when I would just sit there and just draw in the corner somewhere, and then finally people will notice eventually and go,
Mhm.
"Hey, he's doing a good job there," and then you get a little more social. But my kid is, he'll be doing this.
Right.
So,
He doesn't want anybody to see what he's
yeah,
doing.
you don't want me to see it,
Mhm.
and how you gonna get your job out there if you don't want to show your portfolio out there, and
Right.
so
Well, give him some time. How old is he?
he's a 30 now, a little over 30 now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I was going to say give him some time, but maybe he needs a kick in the pants at this point. I don't know, or maybe it's just for him. You never know. It might just be that's his thing, and he wants to keep it for himself.
Yeah. I mean, I think he wants to break into animation industry, but
Hmm.
he's having a really difficult time getting in there.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, I have this great podcast that I can recommend that he go listen to. We have quite a few animators that we've had on the show, including, of course, as you know, the latest podcasts that we have there with Ginger and Jeff. They are two movers and shakers in the Southeast in the animation industry, and they have an incredible amount of really fantastic advice for anybody trying to get into the animation industry.
I say that myself. I say, hey, look, I'm interviewing Ernest Chin from the DreamWorks. Come on and watch. He goes, no,
Yeah.
Dad.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's hard to get your family members interested in the things that we're all working on, right? Yeah, I think my wife probably listened to my podcast for the first real time like late last year, and I'd been doing it for like 4 or 5 years. She goes, "Wow, Pat, you're a really good interviewer," and I'm like, "Thanks, I appreciate that, but geez, now after 4 years, now you tell me, but yeah, I've had a few family members who've been goodly enough to listened to my podcast a few times, but of course it's always about, my wife happens to be an artist, so I would have thought there'd be a little bit more
that's
interest there.
awesome. Having
Yeah,
that
she and I met
partner.
in grad school, so
Wow.
I keep trying to get her on my show actually because she's doing some really amazing things. And there she is,
Oh,
Renee.
that's your wife.
Well,
Hello.
Renee Rivas Bollin. She has not updated her name. Hi, baby.
Nice to meet you.
I was wondering if you'd see that.
Maybe we could have her on here.
She's doing some amazing things. I'd love to get her on the show because she's she started her own home-based business, and she's doing lots and lots of cards and maps and prints and things like that are going into local stores and beyond local. And she's got an Etsy store that's doing very well. And I'm just really proud of what she's doing. She's probably blushing. But anyway, yeah. Check her.
Does she have a page?
I think Renee, give us a link if you're still with us. I think it's Renee Bollin Studio. So RENEE Bollin BOLLIN Studio. That would be
BOLLIN Studio.
Yeah. Yep, and she's all over the place. She's on LinkedIn. Yeah, there it is. She's on LinkedIn. She's on Facebook and Instagram and all the places. And she's just doing great. She does a lot of freelance as well. No, Renee, you have no interest in these things that I do. So no, I didn't think you'd be listening, but I'm glad you're here.
Awesome, yeah.
That's funny. And now, of course, you show up and I start talking about you.
Her ears were running.
Yeah. But yeah, she's doing this just amazing stuff, and I couldn't. I love you too, baby. I couldn't speak more highly of her, and I think that she's a case study in how to approach creating a career for yourself.
You guys really like to draw horses. A beautiful looking horse.
Oh, it's great.
Yeah.
Yep, she can do anything. So she worked in the children's apparel industry for quite some time for Carter's. And I think that helped shape the personal style that she has now.
Awesome. Wow, we had an extra guest today.
I guess so. Well, does anybody else have any other questions? I don't know how much time do we have?
I've got about 20 minutes. I'll have to keep it to about an hour.
About an hour. Yeah, that's a good time, I think. Yeah. So does anybody else have any further questions?
I think about an hour is about rewatchable. Then it goes over an hour. So yeah, let's talk about we talked about your podcast. You got something else coming up.
Yeah, I mean it's more if you're somebody who's interested in starting a YouTube channel, which I have like 3 YouTube channels, but only one of them is getting anything regular, which is the Creative Forge podcast channel at this point. But I'm about to start something called Pat's Production Hacks, which is just all about microphones and cameras and lights and stuff like that for your own kind of home studio. And so there's an awful lot. A lot of the first 10 or 15 videos are all about sound for video. So that channel is live at Pat's Production Hacks, but there's nothing on it yet. And that should start happening in the next couple of weeks. So
just compare Pat's studio to mine. Okay.
Yeah.
All that lighting there, perfect lighting. I mean, it's very pleasing to see.
And I'm pretty too.
No.
Wow. Thanks. No.
It's just all magic and mirrors.
Yeah. You're probably right about that. Just the right camera angle, just the right lighting. It does do magic for you for sure. A good polarized filter, all of that stuff.
Yeah, I mean,
here.
Too
Check
much
out what
computer.
happens to my face when I turn this filter. Look at that's something I can teach people. But anyway, yeah,
Yeah.
it's I got into it. You know, I started out interested in lighting and cameras and sound and all of that because I wanted to do sort of what I started doing on my own Pat Bollin channel years back, and that's doing art tutorials. And I haven't gotten around to that yet, but I do have an awful lot of syllabi lying around from when I was a professor at SCAD and the Art Institute, and I do have plans to eventually make those into video tutorials and put them on YouTube and also some for sale content as well. But I started out wanting to learn about how to do decent production for that purpose, and then I just kind of got absorbed in learning about production for the sake of learning about production, about sound. It can be an obsession, and it certainly has been for me.
You're
So
digging a lot of rabbit holes, right?
I do, which it spreads me out a little too thin, and that's kind of what I was talking about earlier with you know, finding time for these things, whether it be Creator Forge or for you, you know, the comic book worm and things like that. You do have to ultimately make decisions about where your time goes, because as much as I'd love to be full-time drawing on my Pat Bollin channel and doing live streams, and because I've done some live streams in the past and absolutely loved that, because it was like doing classroom demos,
Mhm.
and people would ask questions about, you know, and in
That's it.
fact, some of the stuff that's on my YouTube channel was actually from Periscope, which you may or may not even remember that. It was an early live streaming app where, you know, you could, yeah, actually on Periscope you could go for as long as you wanted to live, but then the video only lasted for one day on the channel, but you could save it for yourself. And I really had just a great time uh, doing those, because people would jump on and ask me questions, and I do want to talk about this topic before we're done too, which is my opinions about whether or not you need to go to art school in order to get an art career. But that was something that people would ask a lot of questions about as well. And then I ended up taking the video from those live streams and then speeding them up and putting them on my YouTube channel. And I'd like to return to that. I really enjoyed that. And it's just life has been busy, and I ended up putting a lot of effort into Creator Forge and other things. And of course, we bought a fixer-upper house, my lovely wife and I, back in 2012, and there
Wow.
have been massive periods of
Talk about
time.
managing your hours, man.
Busy, yeah. I kind of learned on YouTube University how to do renovations on our house, and I did landscape architecture and
Thanks, thanks,
redid it,
Freedom.
my backyard, all kinds of stuff. So Comic Journey, what is your dream project? I think what I was talking about earlier.
What is your favorite medium to work with?
Uh, Still to this day, probably ink on paper, you know, just black and white ink on paper. It's hard to say exactly which thing, though. I mean, I love to sculpt. I love to digital paint. And sometimes when I get into it, I absolutely love making a logo, you know, in Illustrator. But I would say that the thing that I still love the most is what
Oh,
I got started with. So,
yeah.
what is your dream project? Probably again, like if not a comic book project, which I've got a few in mind, and I can't, of course, divulge any details right now. Partly because there's nothing fleshed out enough to really talk about. But if not a comic project, then yeah, teaching online. I would absolutely love to do more art teaching online.
Hey,
I just
CJ, did you watch the clip that I showed before about this one right here? Did you see this?
yeah, that's just
I have all his Pat's website. I mean, not website, YouTube channel, the website too. I guess, yeah, website too, and his podcast. I have that all in the link below. So you could click on that. But this is an example of what he teaches. Let me see if I can make the bigger screen there.
Again, that wasn't even meant to be teaching material, but
Yeah, but I was surprised because at the beginning it's really quiet. At the beginning
oh yeah.
he's just drawing. Then he started talking, and I'm going, oh, this is teaching stuff. So
Sort of.
yeah,
I was just giving my thoughts on the process, on
yeah,
why I was doing the things I was doing. It wasn't really meant to be this is how you should do it so much as this is how I did it and here's why. But I guess that can definitely be considered teaching. It's demonstration for sure.
yeah,
But I would like to put together something more more organized, more step by step. Here's how to do X, Y, or Z in art. I'm a huge perspective drawing nerd, by the
mm,
way, and that's something that I really got a lot of enjoyment out of teaching when I was teaching classes. I had a lot of students. I had a lot of students, honestly, who had difficulty with perspective drawing because that's something that a lot of people have difficulty with. But I also had a lot of students who you could just see the light bulb going off in their head, and they were eureka moments, and they would say something to the effect of, "Oh my God, why didn't somebody teach me like this before this class?" These are sometimes students who were 2 and 3 years into their their courses, and they were just connecting with that material, and you could just kind of see it taking off in their head, and they were able to draw and think in 3 dimensions in ways that they weren't able to do before. Great, that's great to hear. Sometimes I worry that kind of material would be too dry for people, but I have a certain methodology for teaching what I call the 80-20 of perspective drawing. And what I mean by that is very simple. It's I've got 20 perspective drawing books behind my head right here, and some of them are rare books that you cannot find anymore. I am that much of a geek for it. I love it, and I have a knowledge that's very, very broad on how to do this stuff. But what I find that I use in my daily career for years and years and years now, for decades now, is about 20% of that. And I'd really say more like 10% is what you need to do effective art. And I find that if people understand it in that way, that there's really a very small sliver of what you can learn about perspective drawing that you absolutely have to have in order to take off and start creating things that you love and that you're passionate about. I find that people connect with that a little bit more. It's like, oh wow, okay, easy. That depends on your idea of easy, but it can be easier than you think. And again, I find that 20% of my knowledge or less of perspective drawing is what I use for 80% of my work or more. It's really more like 90-10, but there's some tips and tricks that I like to throw in to these classes that I taught that are beyond that initial like 10%. So that's why I call it more like 80-20. And plus if you look up the 80-20 rule in business, there's a thing. So I like calling it 80-20. But anyway, there's such a small amount that you really need to know in order to create effective art that looks natural and looks 3-dimensional on paper or for that matter on screen. And of course nowadays, when I first started teaching that, I think Manga Studio had come out, but the concepts that I was using they predated any software. And so there when I bring up Manga Studio, it's because just like that and SketchUp, or sorry, not SketchUp, but I think it's just Sketchbook from Autodesk on like your iPad and stuff like that. There's software out there that just has amazing tools for perspective drawing and makes it so much easier, where you don't even have to like use rulers anymore and things like that. You could just set points on the screen, and every line that you draw on the screen will go back to a certain vanishing point and so forth. It makes it a lot easier. You still need to have certain knowledge even to use those tools, though, because that's nothing more than a digital version of putting points on a page and using a ruler. It's not like it does it for you. You still have to have some knowledge. And here's the interesting thing. What I find, and this is something that I like to stress a lot back when I was teaching, is not just learning the skill, but learning the why. Why you choose one angle versus another is almost as important as being able to carry it out, meaning like a 1-point perspective or a 2-point or a 3-point. There's emotional impact that each of those angles has. And if you know what people feel when they see these different pictures at different angles, that makes you a much more powerful artist. And so that's the extra tips and tricks that I'm talking about. That goes beyond just the tools and techniques of perspective drawing, but the why and what fors. You know what I mean?
Okay,
So that's really important to me.
When that channel is coming on? I need that channel.
I don't know. I mean, I could do a live stream of it at any time and just pull out my old syllabi and course materials and teach from it, I guess. But putting together something quality, which is something that I'd really like to do, that it would include some animations, which I'm not an animator, so I'd have to get an animator to help me out with it and things like that. That might take some time, but I love live streaming, and I think that might be sometime around the near future, maybe towards middle to end of the year. Of course, it's middle of the year now. But I would like to do it, but I've got to nail down my schedule. And I think one of the things I have to do is to make some hard choices between whether or not, honestly, whether or not I'm going to keep doing Creator Forge, for example. I've got schedules stretching out for another couple of months. I've already got quite a bit of content that's already planned and people who are scheduled to come on and interview, and some really fantastic artists I'm really excited to talk to. And I love doing it. So it's a hard choice for me to say, okay, well, I'm going to spend time here versus here. One of the things that might help with that is that I am getting faster at video editing, at audio editing. I'm learning to let go of my perfectionist bent and just kind of let the conversation just be the conversation. I love what you're doing here, by the way. There's no editing. This is
why that's why I like this. That's
yeah.
Edit. Actually, I thought about taking all those our videos and giving a bite size like you do, but I go, oh, that's a lot of work.
It's an enormous amount of work.
Yeah.
Now, what I have found is that once you've edited an hour and a half video and just kind of distilled it down to like a good conversation flow, it's much easier, especially like my buddy has helped me out a lot with that. So he's marking, after I get everything edited, he's marking the video for good in and out points for topics that I can break down from anywhere from 3 minutes all the way to 15 or 20 minute topical things. And then once you cut those, it's a lot easier. Like I said, once you've got the full length thing edited and put together, it's a lot easier when somebody marks it for you to just cut, put it out. That becomes easier. But again, it's like I'm finding that I'm getting faster and faster at all these things that I'm trying to do. But it could be that I I'm kind of hoping beyond hope that I'll hit some nirvana of of understanding of how to do all this stuff to the point to where I just get so much faster at it. But one of the key things I really do want to do is include live streaming like this, so that there's nothing. It's just you create a thumbnail, you put it out on social media, you jump on just like you and I are doing now, and then the 1 hour that you put into it, that's what you put into it. That sounds absolutely amazing to me. I'd love to do that.
Actually, building a desk. I don't know if you saw those channels where I think Amazon Media, what's that called? Twitch.
Yeah.
Twitch.
Yeah.
People just basically they just draw while people
Mhm.
come watch you draw, and then so I'm trying to set that up myself.
Very cool.
So instead of mm, practicing on my own, I just set aside if somebody comes on, great. If nobody comes on, I'm practicing. So that's what I thought. I thought about doing it myself is to. That's why I'm working on my room right now. It's in the middle of a construction.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm constantly working on my space. Like I said before, I don't think I said that while we were live, but before we were doing this, I was working on my
Thanks,
space a little
Jay.
bit. So always tweaking my space, my lighting, camera, everything like that. So
I mean, you got the. I mean, I watch a lot of YouTube. The one that you were talking about, the hacking. I watch a lot of those
Patch
people, and
production
then
hacks, yeah,
the lighting is very important. The sound
right.
is very important. I realize all that, but I just don't. I just.
Well, when I start putting that out, I'll let you know, and maybe you can learn more about it. Most of the initial videos are all about sound equipment and microphones and what types of audio interfaces to use and things like that. And but that's all because that's what I was into at the time. I started recording those late last year, and just I've been slowly. I recorded like 15 of them, and then I've slowly been editing them to put them all out, once a week or something like that. Once I get it going, but I find that I am not planning that content in the way that a lot of these like camera and gear YouTube channels do. I'm just going with whatever I'm interested in at the time, and if it happens to help somebody else out, great. But after I get past the initial like 15 or 20 of them, it's going to be more and more about camera and lights. And I thought about doing a C-stand video earlier today, which is a type of light stand, for example, and whether or not somebody in a home studio like this even needs such a thing as a C-stand, for example, and stuff like that. It's stuff that I have a lot of knowledge about on a very low level. I'm this kind of jack of all trades with production and not a master of any of it. But I figure if somebody can learn from my muddling through it, then that'd be great, and I have fun doing it. So
That's what I have a. That's why at first I said, I need it all set up, then do it. Then I
right.
decided that, hey, I'll mess up beginning. I'll keep on messing up, and then eventually maybe they could see that I'm changing a little bit.
See, and people never ever have a problem with improving, do they? Yeah, I used to think this about comic book. It's so interesting because I think this is true about YouTube. I think it's true about starting anything. But when I was younger and even now, when I pick up a comic book and the art is like, but you can watch it happening. If somebody who's relatively new, like a new penciler or inker on a comic, and you've never heard of them before, especially, and you can watch by the second, third, even by the second issue, they're improving dramatically. By the third issue, somebody who's been on a run for of a particular title for 3 or 4 issues, by the third issue they're doing so much better. By the fourth or fifth, they hit their stride, and no one ever has a problem with them getting better, do they? You keep buying the comic, you keep coming back. If it's halfway decent in the first place, even halfway, that you'll come back, because especially if the story is still decent, if the storytelling is good, if someone gets worse, then you might have a problem with it, right?
Yeah.
But if you improve, if you're constantly improving, and for YouTube and podcasting, that's not just getting better sound and video and stuff like that. That's your presentation skills. That's your it's everything. It's how you present yourself. It's how you it's how you conduct the interview, blah blah blah. All of this stuff adds up, and it's hard not to improve over time.
Yeah, if you keep on doing, I mean, it's just like art. If you keep on doing it, you're bound to get better. If you
absolutely
don't, then
absolutely. And I applaud you for giving it a shot, man, because it's not easy. People don't realize how hard it is to get in front of a camera lens and not go, like, oh my God, I'm being recorded, And so like just getting past that initial fear, that initial hurdle, you deserve to be applauded, man. And you're doing it
Yeah,
right. You just jump in. Don't be a perfectionist. That's kind of held me up, and imposter syndrome has kind of held me up for a little too long until recently. And I think I'm getting past that at this point, and I'm really kind of enjoying the process of putting stuff out there and just letting it be. Like if it's not perfect, it's not perfect. Who cares, right? You
yeah.
know.
I
But
was invited to talk at some kind of ceremony where they were, celebrating this baby's birthday, and I'm supposed to be elder of the church, and
mhm.
they asked me to speak, and I prepared, and finally when I got there, I was just stuttering everywhere, and this lady in front of me just started cracking up, and I'm going, oh, then I'd say I'm gonna go on YouTube. I'm gonna just see if I could just, force myself to talk to the public and learn to speak. I'm getting a little bit better and better, so
You're doing
that's what
fine,
I
man.
noticed.
You're doing fine. I've watched a fair amount of your shows, and you are getting better and better. But listen, so the one thing that I did want to talk about before we jumped off is that topic of art school. I think that comes out of every topic that I get asked about over the years the most. It's whether or not you need art school. And my answer to that is somewhat complex. I would think so. I'm going to try and make this simple. But my advice to just about everybody now is don't go to art school right off the bat unless you can get uh, not loans, grants. If you're in a state that has, like Georgia has something called the Hope Scholarship, that can actually help dramatically. But if you're in a position where you can get scholarships or fellowships or something like that, that might be a good reason to go ahead and pull that trigger and go to a specialized art school. Um, and another good reason might be if you're somebody who has the financial capability of going without getting into debt. Those might be good reasons to go, because I absolutely loved my art school experience. Especially grad school was absolutely phenomenal. And so here's to me, and I actually put out a video on the Creative Forge podcast recently that hyperbolically said there's only one good reason to go to art school. And
You went with the Jumbo Myers, right?
right,
Yeah.
and for me that reason is the fact that yes, your professors are going to push you, especially if you have good professors at a good school. But your fellow artists, your fellow students will also push you. You will compete with them, hopefully in a positive way, but you will compete with them. And I'll give you an example. My lovely wife, who was on earlier, I don't know if she's still listening. She and I basically met in grad school in our first quarter, and we were part of this group that was getting together in one of the computer labs and really working on our stuff, sometimes until 4, 5 in the morning, with this other little circle of friends that we met in the computer room, and we started having like late night dinners with them at 2 or 3 in the morning, run to Denny's or something like that, and we became buddies with a bunch of them. And she and I were going to that room all the time. And what I'm getting at is that we pushed each other to be there.
Right.
That circle of friends. And then also like within the sequential art department that I was a part of, she was illustration, I was sequential art. Within my specific department, there was an awful lot of, I think, very positive push, to succeed and to improve your skill set. And I think the critiques were incredibly valuable. And just learning to take a critique in a positive way is incredibly valuable. But what I don't like is that I came out of all of that with a monumental amount of student loan debt, and that was even though I was on a fellowship, and I also had the GI Bill because I was in the Navy for 5 years. And so I came out after the Navy with my GI Bill, and I used that to live on while I was going to school. But SCAD is expensive, and it's even more expensive now. And so I have a lot of student loan debt that I'm going to be paying on until I'm 65. And I don't recommend that scenario to anyone. And so here's my advice on what to do as an alternative. I do say, go ahead and apply to your dream schools. Do that. So, but here's what I recommend instead: go to a local state school, especially one where you could get Pell Grants or, like I said, Hope scholarships or something like that, where school is basically free. That does exist, and you can find it. And take something. Heck, take a business degree and then minor in art while you're doing that. That is a relatively new piece of my advice, but it's something that Jeff Yu, he went back to get his business degree. He was one of our guests on the Creative Forge podcast. He's an animator, 3D artist. He works in the attraction industry, and he also went back and got his I think bachelor's in business. And he's got all kinds of great reasons why he did that. But that's something that I recommend highly to artists is learn about business, learn about accounting, learn about those things. I wish I had done that when I was younger. And now I'm having to slowly learn more and more about that as I age, in my career. So that's something that I recommend. But if that's not your bag, fine. Go to a state school, get an art degree at a state school, even if it's just a 2-year degree. And then if you absolutely feel like you need to, then go to a specialized art school to either get your graduate degree or do your year 3 and year 4 if you only went to a 2-year school. But I don't recommend that necessarily. That's if you just absolutely have to go to that dream school. Instead, my recommendation is if you absolutely have to go to school, period, because maybe your parents are pushing you, or maybe you're someone who grew up with the mindset that college was something you needed to do for yourself. Great. Do that. Go to a state school, go to a 2-year institution, and then learn online and go to conventions and go to workshops and seminars with people who are current working professionals in their field. You literally can't go wrong with information like that. There's so many. I mean, I literally have 50 or 60 links saved up for online learning sources that I respect. You can learn from Aaron Blaze, or you can go to proco.com. You can go to
Proco guy.
love him. You can go to the Gnomon Workshop, and which is a GNOMON workshop. And that's online learning. And then they actually have a place you can physically go to in California and learn from them. And I think they actually are an accredited school now. I think they actually have some type of a deal with a local university. But previously they were a certificate program only, and the certificate meant nothing. It's just, hey, when I say it meant nothing, it meant something. It meant you finished their program, and their program was rigorous, and people coming out of that school really got work. And that was the difference. They were teaching current methodology, and the teachers were current working professionals. And that is incredibly valuable. Now, if you go to an art school and you learn from, especially in your first year or two where you're doing your foundations, you can't go wrong learning your foundations: drawing, painting, perspective drawing, color theory, things like that. That's all great stuff. And I love that stuff. I taught that stuff and I absolutely love it. And I think it's really valuable. And I think way too many would-be artists try and skip the foundations, the basics, way too early. However, I still feel like don't get yourself in the debt that I got myself into. And I know a lot of people who do have that debt hanging over their head. So I say, go to a state school, go to a 2-year degree.
Nowadays, during my time, school wasn't that bad, but during my kids' time, I could not afford it for them to go to some of those high-dollar art schools.
Right. Yeah, it's crazy, and like I said, I had a fantastic experience, and my, especially in grad school, my skill set really increased dramatically. I would say in the 3 years that I was in grad school, I learned more than I would have learned in 10 years by myself, especially if I was not working while I was going to grad school. I worked full time while I was going to undergrad, but in grad school, I part of the reason I went into some debt is because I chose not to work while I was doing that. Good choice, bad choice. Nah, I don't know. Depends on how you look at it. I don't think I'd necessarily have the career I do now if I hadn't gone to grad school and focused. I really did improve my skills and get a lot of new skills that I wasn't when I went into grad school. I didn't even think I was going to get like digital painting. I didn't even know I was going to be into that. And I saw a lot of other people doing it, wanted to give it a try, and learned from a lot of people there at SCAD, and then continued to learn as I got into my career. And it was really valuable. But
SCAD, you went to SCAD.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yep.
My kid was about to, he applied there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's they'll push you. It's hard. It's very hard. It's very expensive. Yeah. So online learning sources are my recommendation, and especially if you're anywhere near one of the city centers, whether it be Atlanta or especially anywhere in California, there's things called ateliers. And if you know Proco.com, Stan Procopinko, he didn't go to art school. Yeah. He got all of his learning from an atelier, and I want to say, I don't want to say which atelier it was, but you can go to Proco.com, Proko.com, and learn about his journey. But
he has a huge YouTube channel.
So. Yeah, he has a YouTube channel. He's got a whole school online, and it's real. It's valuable. His education, and it's not just him. He's bringing on lots of other high-end pros to teach various courses. And but anyway, he started out as learning in an atelier, and in essence, his school Proco is an online atelier. There's no degree, but you can get work. And here's the last thing I want to say about this is I work in game art, and as one of the hosts of the Creative Forge podcast, we have interviewed so many people in so many different industries. Most of them, I admit, have been to some form of art school. Most of them will tell you the same thing that I'll tell you right now, that they really don't care. The companies, the studios don't care where you went to school. It might get you in the door a little. You know what I mean? Like, oh, well, I went to SCAD and this person went to SCAD, and so I know that they push their students really hard there. It's a quality education. That might. But you know what's going to really do it? It's your portfolio. Right. It's your portfolio. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to give somebody a second look if they went to SCAD and have a crappy portfolio. I'm not going to do it, and nobody will. So it's all about the effort and the time and the passion that you put into your portfolio. That's what matters when you're applying. And in fact, most people at these studios only look over a resume in a cursory way, like just to make sure that the basics, the basic boxes are checked. And for the most part, that's where the HR department comes in anyway. So the studio heads won't look at that. They just, let's look at that portfolio. That's it. Yeah. That's it. And it doesn't matter if you didn't go to school anywhere at all, if you have no degrees to your name at all, and you're amazing at what you do, that's what they care about. And the second thing they care about, unfortunately, for some people, this is something else that I talked about with John Boyd Myers, is personality. And it's important. It's important. They want to know whether or not they could see, yeah, they want to know whether or not you're someone that can have a good professional conversation and a not so professional conversation. I mean, every job I've ever had, I went out to lunch with somebody before, the decision was made to hire me. And every time I've hired someone or been a part of the hiring process, I've taken someone out to either lunch or dinner and had conversations with them, because I want to know whether or not there's someone that I could see sitting next to in a cubicle for 8 to 9 hours a day, right? Is this a person that I could get along with? And I think that's going to be true no matter what. And so the reason I say that some people may not like this part of the answer is that, people who are more shy or have social anxiety, that could be very difficult for them.
Yeah.
And to those people, I tell them, just do your best, smile and nod and breathe, and it may not be as painful as you think.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard to change that. Hard to change that. But yeah, I mean, I, I got my degree in engineering. I consider myself a very efficient engineer, most efficient engineer, because I just made enough to graduate. And when I got to the, you know, my interviewer, he looked at my grade.
Mhm.
He goes, "Hey, let's talk." So, so we start talking about football. And I
Right.
got a job.
Right. Absolutely. And for people in the, animation industry, it's like you're going to talk about what your favorite animated films are and things like that. Same thing with the game industry. They're going to want to know what your favorite games are. So, you know,
Hey, Pat, can you come back again, please?
oh, haven't you heard me talk enough?
No, not. Sounds like you got a lot more to talk about. So I'd
We'll
like to have
see.
you back. I'd like to have you back.
I'd absolutely be willing to come back. This has been fun. I really appreciate it. I hope everybody who's I'm really pleased to see that there's quite a few people in the comments section. So we definitely did have people watching, and I appreciate that. I hope you guys got a lot out of what I had to say. And if you or anybody that has any questions about my career or how to get into a career similar to mine, or even one of the people that we've interviewed on the Creative Forge podcast, feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn, especially, or anywhere I happen to be online, I'll answer. But LinkedIn seems to have been the place that most people have reached out to me for questions and mentorship and things like that. And I'm always happy to help somebody who's got a good question.
Awesome. Chat room, guys. I appreciate you guys coming by. Really appreciate it. I'm definitely going to try to get Pat back here. Yeah, there's a lot, and I put his links below, all his different channels. So go check him out, and please, hey, get some good learning materials, some entertaining material as well. So edutainment.
Edutainment.
Anyway, bye guys. Oh, Jeffrey's here. Bye guys. You need to watch it on rewind. Thank you guys. Stay with me.
Thanks a lot, man.
I'm gonna go in the broadcast.